Picture a line between passive and aggressive. At the middle point of this line lies assertiveness, a place where you work with others by finding the right language at the right time to express your feelings and thoughts. The ability to express feelings, it's the ability to express beliefs and thoughts openly, being able to voice opinions, disagree, and take a definite stand, even if it's emotionally difficult to do so, and even if you have something to lose by doing so. It's the ability to stand up for personal rights, not allowing others to bother you or take advantage of you. Assertive behavior is not overly controlled or shy. It's an expression of feelings and beliefs directly without being aggressive or abusive. Welcome to the Behaviorist with Work Wisdom, where we help you adopt high-performance mindsets, behaviors, communication, and culture. I'm your host, Sarah Colantonio. Our intention for the Behaviorist podcast is to share accessible, concrete practices that you can weave into your whole life to begin a shift towards joy and meaningful achievement. Today, I'm joined by Isaac Etter, an entrepreneur and founder of the organization called Identity. Am I missing some other?
No, that's great.
Okay, I love it. To discuss the communication practice of assertiveness. And the whole reason that we know and love Isaac is you were assertive. You basically reached out to us and you were like, let's hang out. So part of the reason I wanted to talk about this is a skill that I have to work really hard at, this particular skill. But I wanted to ask you what you thought of that pretty lengthy definition in the introduction. Is that what you think of when you think of assertiveness?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think really to be assertive, you do have to kind of walk this line, as you mentioned. Like, you don't want to be overly aggressive, but you also don't want to hold back too much, because people, respect you making your intentions clear as well. And so I think it was a really great definition of being assertive. Yeah.
One of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this is because for leaders, they sometimes have, first of all, they sometimes don't know the definition.
Yeah.
They don't know that it's on this continuum.
Yeah.
And they struggle with this thing that it comes out of the book Radical Candor, which is ruinous empathy. Have you heard of this?
I don't think I have heard of this term. No.
It's the worst. It's the worst for leaders. So it's basically when you feel too worried that you're going to hurt somebody's feelings, so you don't say anything, even if the thing that maybe your direct report is doing isn't right, is the wrong thing, or it's not good enough, but you feel so bad. You're like, I don't want to hurt their feelings, and then so you don't say anything.
Yeah.
That's ruinous empathy. That's like, you're not
helping. I understand
helping.
Ruinous empathy. Wow. As somebody who has employees, I understand ruinous.
Exactly. So constructive assertiveness, this idea of being assertive is clearly communicating, it's being directive, but it's with care. So there's an artfulness to it, and it goes a really long way. In fact, another reason why we want to talk about it is not just the problem of ruinous empathy, but the benefits of being constructively assertive there's a ton of research around it. So it's how we foster engagement. It's how we foster creativity. It's how we scale our success. Yeah. So those of us that are kind of afraid to be assertive, oh my gosh, we're totally missing out. I sent you some notes earlier. There's it helps with overall health and safety, increase in productivity, decrease in costs, increase in employee satisfaction, because it helps in resolving conflicts, gaining resources for your team, clearing obstacles, profit, increase personal career success, creativity, all those things. I mean, the list goes on.
It's a big one.
Yeah. So, for you, why do you think it's so important?
Yeah. I mean, for me, just such a timely thing for me personally, as I've been really thoughtful about kind of like the next round of hiring for me and what kind of leader I want to be. Like you said, like leaders can often fall into that candor. Would you say? What was the word? Empathy?
Ruinous empathy.
Can fall into ruinous empathy very easily. And I've definitely seen myself fall there in the past. And so I think one thing that's the top for me when being assertive is that when you're assertive and you're clear, you don't leave any areas for people to wonder about whether they're doing the right thing, or for you to feel like you can't change something because you weren't clear. And I've definitely fallen into situations where I've brought people on and said, do this. And certainly they've done that, but I didn't give a clear expectation or a process flow or how we do things. And by not being assertive in those areas, I left a lot of holes. And so for me, being assertive is all about a mutual respect that you're building. Because people want to do well. Like most people don't come into things negatively, but you set people up for failure when you're not assertive. And so just as a leader, that's, I think, why it's so important to be assertive, because these people that have chosen to follow you down whatever this path is deserve the respect of you being clear about what your intentions are. And I've certainly failed at that in the past, and I think I'm getting better at it now. But that's, I think, from a leadership perspective, why it's important to me. And from a personal perspective, you know, as somebody who has been a young person trying to make their name as an entrepreneur and as a leader, for me, I've always been like, you know, if I want these people to take me seriously, who I respect and I see, like you and Kendrin, I need to be clear about like, hey, like I want to come and sit with you all because I want to learn from you. Like I want to add value where I can, and I want to learn from you and be a part of your ecosystem because I see you as valuable, and I hope that I can be the same. And being assertive in that way, I think especially for young people, is really important because that's the only way you really grow and learn. We can learn a lot from the internet, but valuable relationships and mentorship is where we really grow. And in order to get those, you have to be a little bit assertive. And it can be nerve-wracking, and you're going to have to be okay with people saying no or ghosting you.
Sure.
Because it does happen, but, you know, all it really takes is one yes, right? And so it's much better to just be assertive and say, hey, can I get 30 minutes of your time? 30 minutes, I just want to sit down and learn how you got to here because I want to get there one day. And I think it's the best thing we can do, especially as young people, but just as people who want to learn and grow in general.
You know, you're talking about those holes. I have to wonder, like, how much are we missing out on? Because, like, what's going on with that kid that in their heart they're like, I want this, and then, you know, and they don't say.
Exactly. Yep.
So it's like so it's also part of emotional intelligence. It's a skill. So it's completely developable. It's not just a personality trait.
Oh,
you know, you can leverage it. You can say, all right, I'm gonna use it today.
Yes. I think there's certainly many times that I've failed at it. You know what I mean? Like the only way to get good at being assertive is to fail at being assertive one or two times.
You're so right.
You know what I mean? And that's what we miss half the time, because it's the same with entrepreneurship, right? It's the same with business. You can have a good idea, but the execution is where it matters. And it's the same with all of our soft skills. Because we can learn them all, we have to just start. And that can be the scariest part, is to just send that message, to approach that person, to go to that mixer. That's step one, but in a lot of ways that can be the most daunting for whatever reason it may be. But I hope to encourage people to take that first step because it really is where you find out, you know, what's next, what you love, what you don't, what kind of leader you want to be, what kind of entrepreneur you want to be. It's by being assertive and taking that step forward where you can actually find out. Because if you never take it, you never know.
Right.
And that's worse.
Oh, that's the worst.
That's the worst.
Regret.
Yeah, regret is worse than failing at being assertive a couple times.
Gosh. Yeah. See, that's why I'm obsessed with this, because I was in a meeting like 3 years ago. I should have spoken up. I still think about it. I didn't speak up. And I regret it.
Yep. It sits with you.
Yes.
It sits with you. And trust me, if I can't sleep some nights, I'm thinking about all the things I should have said in meetings or calls or podcasts. Like it just lives with you when you miss that opportunity. And I think we don't do enough to also sometimes allow that doorway to exist for people. Because being assertive can be so intimidating, I always wonder, and at least in my experience, always hope to create like as open door as possible for other people to be assertive with me, right?
Yeah.
I love having hour coffees with people, and I don't think that I'm some great success, but I just being one step ahead of somebody, the person who's a step behind you, taking that 30 minutes can mean everything.
Yeah.
And so it's like, on one end, we need to help people be more assertive, but at the same time, as leaders, we also need to be accepting of that assertiveness and be willing to like reach our hands out when we can, and pull other people up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's also being assertive, I think, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's saying like, oh, people have opened the door for me, so I'm going to open the door for other people.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that.
Thank you.
Here at Work Wisdom, we say that in order to be constructively assertive, we can maximize. There's a couple ways we can do that. And one is to practice self-awareness, do the self-check. And you really were touching on this, thinking about when was there a time when you benefited from someone being, assertive with you, direct with you.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, that's such a good reminder.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I have some fantastic mentors. And even just last week, a mentor just sent me an article and he said, I feel like I really just need to pound this into your head. Like, I just don't think you get this. And I remember at first, you would want to be defensive. Like, what do you mean I don't get it? I'm doing fine. But I remember I just stared at the message for 2 minutes and I was like, I should be really grateful that a mentor can look at an article and say, Isaac isn't great at this. He should read this article. And like that's self-awareness. That's the step one. And I think, to take it back into like an organizational leadership, like when I think about even just like the past couple of months of doing first hires and hiring contractors to do whether content work or something, like when I think about self-awareness for me, when people weren't meeting the high quality or what I wanted from them, even though I gave them the assignment, I think as leaders, we can be very quick to go and be like, oh, you're not doing this right. You're not doing this right. But self-awareness as a leader is wondering, okay, I gave out this assignment to this person. I hired this person, whether for a short term or a long term. And if they're not meeting what I want them to achieve, I need to first reflect on what did I tell them?
Yeah.
What packet of information did I give them to go off of? And like for me, that's why I realized like I just need to do a whole lot more work in being assertive and clear on like what our expectations are, what are our operational flows, like how do I want things to be done? Because it wasn't anybody else's fault that they didn't meet the expectation that was in my head, because the expectation in my head wasn't on paper.
Right.
And like, you can't do anything about that. They did what I told them to do.
Yeah.
And so, that's a part of being self-aware, being assertive, is not immediately looking at the other person as the fault, but really reflecting in, because you steer the ship.
Right.
And that's a part of being assertive. That's a part of being self-aware. That's a part of being a leader.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to, use this to scale in all those ways that you talked about.
Yeah.
You're not going to have happy employees if every time they don't meet the expectation in your head, you're, angry emails, phone calls. That's a surefire way to have people not want to work for you.
Yeah, definitely. One of the other things that we talked about is being intentional and clear in our communication. So going back to that radical candor, that it's a really good book, by the way, where she talks about when you are practicing radical candor, it's caring personally, but challenging directly. So again, it's artful.
It's very artful.
So
that's a great quote.
Yeah, it's so good. Wow. And actually, so she worked with an executive who's at Facebook now, but this was back when they were at Google, and she did a presentation, and after the presentation, her boss was like, I want to talk to you. And she told her some of the good things she did. And then she said, one thing that is a problem is you use and ah, and it takes away from your credibility. And she was like, okay, whatever. And she was like, I'd like you to get some coaching. Yeah. And she's like, it's fine. And she said, I don't know how many times I need to tell you, but you need to get coaching. Yeah. So it was bananas because it's incredibly intelligent, and she was kind of defensive about it. But then she said, so then I went, and I only needed like 2 or 3 sessions, and it was fun. And now I don't and ah when I do my presentations. But it was one of those moments where she had to be direct. Like, this is what I'm hearing. You're really smart, and you gave really good information, and you said and ah so many times it was distracting. Yeah. And since I taught public speaking, that example really sticks in my head. You love it. Yeah. So being intentional and clear in our communication, we have our authentic communication book, and we have a section about, what you were talking about before, about what am I expressing to the other person? Like, is it clear? And do they have buy-in? Are they saying, yes, this is, I understand, this is what can be done?
Absolutely.
And so that's one of the things, just paying attention to our communication. The other thing when it comes to constructive assertiveness is tapping into the motivation of others. So there's this in the neuroscience of motivation, David Rock recognized that there's these 5 elements. It's called SCARF, that motivates us. Yeah. So it's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And so it's like lights up in our brain. If we recognize, if we feel like we have status, if there's some element of certainty, I kind of know what to expect. I love the fact that also we are motivated by autonomy. It's like we need certainty, but we also want autonomy.
We want a little curiosity. We always do.
Relatedness, of course. Yeah. So that connection, that human connection, and then fairness. So if we can put that within, the framework of our feedback or whatever we're asking for, it lands. Like, it makes sense. And we also talk about empowerment, and that's like probably a whole nother podcast, but empowerment means that you're making sure roles and expectations are super clear. Yeah. You have, there's clarity, we call it true authority with clear boundaries,
Exactly. Which is hard for a lot of people. I mean, talk about one of my greatest growths in that area of empowering people that did stuff for me. Yeah. Because, I mean, gosh, when you have a baby, which is a business or an organization, whatever it may be, to let somebody else walk in and do something can be very hard. Very anxious. And I actually learned this the best at Safe House, which I think people probably wouldn't expect. But at Safe House, some days we would have, 50 volunteers in a day. Wow. We'd have different people leading different teams, and we were working coincide with different organizations. And I had to really learn how to not control situations. Yeah. And taking that into my work now at Identity, I've noticed that when I brought, our creative director in, I had this rule that basically, if it wasn't a nerve for me, it wasn't make or break for me, I was going to let him have the final say in that area because I don't know anything about that. Okay. It's it just didn't matter. It's I'm not a video producer. I don't know anything about branding. I know what we're all going after, but he was the expert in that. Yeah. And so I said, if it didn't really rub me the wrong way, he was going to have the final say. And if we had to go back and change something a year later, we did. We could, you know what I mean? And so, you know, our marketing, our branding, our colors, I let him take a lot of control on that. And I'm so thankful for it. Because instead of spending my days and nights being that font was wrong, I don't really like that, I actually just adjusted to understanding that, he had a set of information that, I didn't have. Yeah. And that is a discipline, and I wasn't always great at it. I had to coach myself into being don't say anything, let that be what it is, because that's not a major issue. But boy, did we move a whole lot faster because of that. Yeah. And so I agree with that. Empowering people, it's daily process, but it makes a world of a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's a great story.
Thank
you. you're having this in real time.
Yeah, it's honestly perfect timing because this is all happening to me this year.
Yeah.
It's like building a bigger business, going down a different road, and I've been in nonprofit for so long to now be in the for-profit lane and trying to reach venture scale and doing all these things. You have to learn a lot of these disciplines in real time. And so I think it is a very timely conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm curious about it. It sounds like right now you have to use it in all of these different ways. Yeah. So the self-awareness, being really intentional and clear in your communication, thinking about motivation,
exactly,
and empowerment.
Yeah.
What are the ones that sort of rise to the top for you? What are the ones that...
Self-awareness all the time.
Okay.
I mean, self-awareness, as I think a leader, a founder, like you have to work from that place constantly.
Yeah.
Because it's self-awareness to make sure that you're going down the right lane, right?
Yeah.
Because we can fall in love with an idea, a company that isn't actually working, but because we're not being self-aware, we keep going down it when we should pivot or stop, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so you have to have self-awareness from that front. Then you have to have self-awareness with your customers, right? Mm-hmm. Because you might deliver a product that you want to have one impact, but it has another impact. That impact can be just as good. But if it's not the impact you wanted and you're not also being self-aware, you can get stuck trying to force something to work a way that it actually doesn't work. Yeah. And then we get to the employee side where you also have to have self-awareness and assertiveness and clarity. Yeah. And so these are really how these things are working and manifesting for me right now, is making sure that at the beginning or end of every day, I'm just like thinking through the interactions that I had, with a VC. What did they say? What were their concerns? With a customer, what was their concerns? What pain points did they have that we were either addressing or not addressing? Yeah. And from an employee standpoint, like, what did they feel like they were doing well? What was easy for them? And where was it not easy? Where were the pain points there? What wasn't clear in my communication? Yeah. And so it's just a lot of self-awareness. And then it tails into like these being assertive. Because I'm self-aware, I know when and where to be assertive as well. You know what I mean? I know whose door do I need to knock on, right? Who do I need help with? Hey, do I need to go knock on Sarah and Kenya's door and say, hey, we need some team building stuff. Come on. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like it definitely transitions into all these other lanes. And so it's majorly important to me.
Yeah. I love it. What do you think the cost would be to your work if you didn't practice the art of assertiveness?
Oh, I think, the cost would probably be either non-existence or definitely very slow existence, which is fine. For some people, it can be fine to go slower. But one of the biggest benefits, I think, to the way that I produce fast has actually been my ability to, reach out, ask for help, ask for advice, and be assertive about the fact that I want critical feedback. We grow the best in community. And we grow the best with assertive clarity about how we're doing, right? Just like the mentor who felt comfortable enough to send me a message saying, I feel like I need to pound this thought into your head, right? That was me being assertive with him, because I remember 2 years ago when I asked him to be my mentor, right? I had to be assertive first in that situation, but because of it, now I have this loop of feedback that might be uncomfortable at times, but is helping me grow fast. And it can be the same with any area. If you want to start something or start a business, like being assertive to reach out to an asset, to reach out to a business mentor, like that's a step of assertiveness, to be clear and like say, hey, I need this help. I want this information. And so I just think it's majorly important. Yeah.
Okay. Were you ever assertive and it backfired? It wasn't constructive? Never.
Yeah, it had to be yes. You know what I mean? It almost had to be yes. There's certainly been times where like you're assertive in the wrong ways, right? You might be frustrated. Like I can think of times, especially in more stressful situations, like at Safe House, like just being assertive in the wrong directions, right? And again, I guess, you kind of go back to being self-aware. Yeah. Is like, if you're assertive in the wrong direction and it backfires, your best bet is not to necessarily sulk, though you probably will. You probably will be up at like 2:00 having a dream flashback of it, like I do. But it is to learn and to grow from it, right? It's like I've learned, at least I would hope, and I'm sure I'm not perfect at it, but at least I've tried to learn how to navigate emotional situations without forcing what I think should happen, right? Because, in a protest, in a very tense scene like we were in during those days, the answer wasn't always to be very assertive. Some of the answer was to listen first. And so there's definitely been times where I've talked too fast, which is a wrong way to be assertive. You can also be assertive in silence.
Yeah.
And so by listening to other people, like you said, people's status is something that people really care about. By listening to somebody without having to force in your opinion or interjection can actually be a great way of being assertive. Because later, then you can come and say, hey, I listened to what you said. These were the points that really stuck out to me. And it could be a month later, it could be a week later, but that's still being very assertive by listening clearly. And that goes, again, from client to staff to stranger to somebody of status.
Yeah. So my last question for you. You've given so much wisdom here. What advice would you give to those who don't have the natural affinity for being assertive or don't feel as if they're in a position to practice assertiveness?
I mean, you're always in the position. Let me say that. Is that there's really no position that you're not, that you couldn't be assertive in some way, right? Because it doesn't really matter whether you're, doing something that, you don't want to be doing. Let's just say like you're working a 9-to-5 that you really just don't want to be in. You might think you have no power. Well, you do have power because you have the internet, you have Instagram, you have LinkedIn, you have Facebook, right? And so, 99% of my assertiveness is on LinkedIn. And I love talking with other people about LinkedIn because the connections and the friendships and the things I've made on LinkedIn just by posting content and then following up with people or DMing people about what I'm doing who I know have similar interest. Like, that's actually how I've been able to grow a lot of my, knownness and child wellness. That's how a lot of people know me, is actually from LinkedIn. And so there's always a way to be assertive. And sometimes you have to find the most comfortable way to be assertive. And then scale into the most uncomfortable way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, personally, that was first Instagram. Like, for me, it was first Instagram, and then it was LinkedIn. And now I'm very comfortable going up to somebody at an event. I wasn't always. That was probably the weakest area for me at first. But now it's like, okay, I've kind of gained that muscle of like, it doesn't really matter if somebody responds how you want them to or not. Sometimes it's actually just more about getting in people's heads. And I could do a whole nother podcast about how part of my assertiveness is just being in people's thought process when they think about certain things. And so that's why I use LinkedIn, and why I would suggest people to find an avenue where they can just start to take a little bit of action towards whatever it is they want to be. Do you want to be a better leader? Okay, go follow some profiles and respond to their stories when they post something that you care about. And that's a way to start being assertive and getting in that lane. And show up. That's all you really can do, is just show up to things. And so, don't make too many excuses, though. So that's the surefire way not to be assertive, is if you keep making excuses of why you can't be. Because there's tons of ways you can be without putting too much at risk. And so find them, execute, and then just keep scaling that execution.
I love it. That feels so doable.
Yeah, it's so doable. So easy to hide behind your screen at first. And I respect it. I respect people that hide behind their screens at first, but at least are making movement. Because a step forward is better than no movement at all. And it doesn't really have to look however you think it has to look. It can be done in your way and in your comfortable zone. Because there's all kinds of factors that people experience that we can't prejudge. So we can't make a guidebook for how assertiveness should look. You have to do it in your own language and get to the point that you want to get to. So just make that step forward.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Isaac.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I mean, the wind out there, I don't know if people could hear the wind.
Yes.
But thank you for coming to talk about the art of
Absolutely.
assertiveness. I really appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for downloading The Behaviorist. We hope you'll subscribe. Please reach out to us through our website, workwisdomllc.com, where you can enjoy Work Wisdom Press and productions, ask questions, and give suggestions of topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes. We have a custom where we end with a quote. This is Audre Lorde. "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid."